Search his bag. Claire Whitmore did not raise her voice, and that somehow made the command colder. The ballroom of the Whitmore Grand Hotel fell into a silence so complete that even the string quartet near the marble fountain seemed to lose its breath. 1,000 crystal lights burned above the charity gala, spilling gold across black tuxedos, silk gowns, champagne glasses, and faces that had never worried about the price of dinner. At the center of it all stood Ethan Walker, a 38-year-old single father in a charcoal suit that had been pressed too many times and repaired at the cuffs by careful hands. Beside him, his 8-year-old daughter, Maddie, held the edge of his sleeve with both hands, her small blue eyes moving from the security guards to the cameras, then back to her father. The gala was being streamed live for Whitmore Global's Children's Heart Fund, and only moments earlier Maddie had been waiting backstage to sing the opening song. A trembling little hymn she had practiced for 3 weeks in their apartment above a hardware store. Then the diamond necklace vanished. Not just any necklace. The Whitmore legacy, a piece Claire's late mother had worn in every company portrait. A necklace worth more than Ethan had earned in 10 years of fixing boilers, elevators, and broken heating units for people who never learned his name. Someone whispered that the poor man with the canvas bag had been standing near the display case. Someone else said he was not on the donor list. A third voice, polished and poisonous, murmured, "People like that do not come to places like this without wanting something." Ethan heard it all. He did not flinch. He simply lowered one hand to Maddie's shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze, the way he did when thunderstorms shook the old windows at home. Claire stepped down from the stage, her white evening gown sharp as winter, her expression controlled by years of boardrooms and inheritance. "Mr. Walker," she said, reading his name from a tablet her assistant held out. "You are here as the parent of a scholarship performer, correct?" "Yes, ma'am," Ethan answered. His voice was quiet, steady, and worn smooth by hard years. "My daughter was invited to sing." "And yet," Claire said, letting the room lean toward her, "you were seen near the jewelry display minutes before my mother's necklace disappeared." Maddie's fingers tightened. "My daddy did not take anything." A few guests looked away, not because they believed her, but because innocence is uncomfortable when it stands between power and pride. Claire's eyes flicked to the old canvas bag hanging from Ethan's shoulder. It held Maddie's inhaler, a folded backup dress, 2 peanut butter sandwiches wrapped in foil, a small music box, and a gold pocket watch engraved with words Ethan had not allowed himself to read in years. "Open it," Claire said. Ethan looked at the cameras first, then at his daughter. "Not in front of my child." The words were not defiant. They were protective. They carried no anger, only dignity. Claire paused just long enough for the room to feel the choice placed in her hands. Then she made the wrong one. "Then you should have thought of that before coming here." A security guard stepped forward. The live chat on the giant screen slowed. Maddie's lower lip trembled, but Ethan did not move back. He took the bag from his shoulder, held it with both hands, and placed it on the white linen table as if laying down something sacred. In that moment, no one knew the truth. No one knew why that gold watch mattered. No one knew that the father of the woman accusing him was about to walk into that ballroom and recognize the man everyone had already judged. The guard reached for the zipper, but Ethan placed one hand gently over the top of the bag. Not to stop him, not to challenge him, just to slow the moment down enough for Maddie to breathe. "Please," Ethan said, his eyes never leaving Claire's. "There is medicine in there. Let me take that out first." Claire looked at the little girl, then at the cameras, then at the necklace display standing empty beneath its glass dome. For half a second, something human crossed her face, but it vanished under the weight of reputation. "Let security handle it." Ethan nodded once, the way a man nods when he understands that kindness will not be returned tonight. He stepped back. Maddie pressed closer to his side, her cheeks pale beneath the ballroom lights. She had not wanted to come to the gala at all. 3 hours earlier, she had stood in their tiny bathroom wearing a blue dress Ethan had found at a church clothing drive, staring at herself as if the mirror belonged to someone richer, braver, and less afraid. "What if my voice shakes, Daddy?" she had asked. Ethan had knelt on the cracked tile and tied the ribbon around her waist with the same care he used when repairing old watches. "Then let it shake," he told her. "Sometimes the bravest songs tremble first." Maddie had smiled then, small but real. She had survived 2 heart surgeries before she turned 6. She knew hospital ceilings, plastic bracelets, and the beeping of machines better than playgrounds. The Whitmore Children's Heart Fund had helped cover part of her final operation, and when the foundation invited former patients to perform at the annual gala, Maddie begged to sing. Not for attention, not for praise. She wanted to say thank you in the only language that did not frighten her. Music. So Ethan took an extra maintenance shift, borrowed a suit from his neighbor, polished his old shoes until the leather almost remembered being new, and packed the canvas bag like a father preparing for battle without armor. The inhaler went in first, then the backup dress in case Maddie spilled juice on the first one, then 2 sandwiches because gala food looked beautiful but rarely filled a child, then the little walnut music box that had belonged to her mother, Nora, whose voice Maddie barely remembered but whose lullaby still lived inside the tiny metal comb. Last came the gold pocket watch. Ethan almost left it at home. He had held it over the kitchen table that afternoon, thumb resting on the engraving. For the man who gave me tomorrow, R.W. He had not opened it in years. Some gifts hurt because they come from a life you lost. Some memories sit quietly until the world mistakes them for evidence. Now, under the chandeliers of the Whitmore Grand, everything he had packed with love was about to be displayed as suspicion. The guard pulled the zipper open, and the room leaned in, hungry for proof. The guard did not pull anything out yet. He only opened the bag wide enough to look inside, and somehow that small movement made the entire ballroom feel smaller. Claire watched his face for the first sign of confirmation. A nod, a change in his eyes. Anything that would turn suspicion into certainty and protect the clean, polished image of her company. She had built her life around control. Control of meetings. Control of headlines. Control of rooms full of men twice her age who smiled at her like she was temporary. At 34, Claire Whitmore had learned that hesitation could be mistaken for weakness, and weakness, in her world, was blood in the water. So when the necklace disappeared, she did what power had taught her to do. She found the person who looked out of place. Ethan Walker had looked out of place from the moment he entered the Whitmore Grand. Not rude, not careless, just quiet. His suit was clean but old, his shoes shined but worn at the soles, his daughter tucked close to him as though the wealth in the room might reach out and bruise her. A woman near the champagne table had whispered that he came through the service entrance. A board member claimed he recognized Ethan from a maintenance crew that had once repaired the hotel's loading dock. Claire's assistant, Marissa Vale, leaned in with a tablet and said, "He is not on the donor list. Parent of performer only. No table assignment. No VIP clearance." Each sentence was small. Together, they built a cage. Claire should have asked more questions. She should have remembered that not every person outside a velvet rope is a threat. But the cameras were on. The donors were watching. The empty glass case stood behind her like an accusation. And above it all, her mother's portrait stared down from the projection screen, elegant and still, wearing the same diamond necklace that was now missing. He was seen near the display, Marissa whispered. By who? Claire asked. Senator Hale's wife. Did she see him touch it? Marissa paused. She said he was close enough. Close enough. In a courtroom, it would mean nothing. In a ballroom full of frightened rich people, it was enough to turn a father into a suspect. Ethan stood 5 feet away from the linen table with his hands folded in front of him, not because he was guilty, but because he refused to give them a reason to call him dangerous. Maddie looked up at him, searching for the version of her father who could fix anything. A leaking pipe, a dead battery, a loose hinge, a nightmare at 2 in the morning. But this was different. This was not broken wood or rusted metal. This was pride dressed as justice. Claire lifted her chin. Proceed. The guard reached deeper into the canvas bag, and the first thing his hand closed around was not a necklace, not stolen diamonds, not proof of a crime, but a child's blue inhaler with Maddie's name written on white tape across the side. The inhaler looked small in the guard's black-gloved hand, almost weightless, yet it landed on the white linen table with the force of a verdict. Maddie reached for it by instinct, but the guard set it just beyond her fingers while he continued searching. Ethan's jaw tightened, not from anger, but from the quiet pain of watching his daughter's private struggle become part of a public show. That is hers, he said softly. She may need it. Claire glanced at Maddie, then at the camera crew standing near the stage, then at the donors forming a half circle around the table. She can have it back when we are finished. Ethan said nothing. He only looked at the inhaler, then at Maddie, and gave her the smallest nod he could manage, a father trying to lend courage when his own was being tested. The guard pulled out the backup dress next, folded carefully inside a grocery bag. A few women in designer gowns looked at the simple blue cotton fabric and exchanged glances they thought were subtle. Then came the sandwiches wrapped in foil, slightly flattened from the ride over in the city bus. One man near the bar let out a soft laugh, the kind people use when they want cruelty to sound like sophistication. He brought lunch to a gala, someone whispered. Another voice answered. Maybe he thought the caviar was takeout. A ripple of amusement moved through the crowd, thin and polished and shameful. Maddie's face turned red. She lowered her eyes to the floor as if the marble itself might open and hide her. Ethan stepped closer, not toward the guests, not toward Claire, but toward his daughter. He took off his suit jacket and placed it gently around her shoulders. Look at me, sweetheart, he whispered. There is no shame in being prepared. The room should have heard wisdom in that. Instead, it kept watching the bag. Next came the small walnut music box, its corners worn smooth by years of being held. The guard turned it over, confused by its plainness, then placed it beside the sandwiches. Ethan's eyes followed it, and for the first time all night, something in him seemed to bend. Not break. Bend. That box had sat on Nora's nightstand during the last winter of her life. She had wound it every evening for Maddie, even when her hands grew weak, even when her voice faded into breath. It played 8 slow notes from an old lullaby, nothing grand enough for a ballroom, but enough to make a little girl believe her mother was still near. Careful with that, Ethan said. The guard paused, then reached in again. This time he pulled out a photograph, folded at the corners, showing Ethan, Nora, and baby Maddie in front of a county fair Ferris wheel, all 3 of them smiling into a sunlit life that no longer existed. The photograph slipped from the guard's hand and touched the floor. Ethan bent down immediately, picked it up, and brushed the edge with his thumb. He did not look embarrassed. He looked reverent. That small gesture slowed the room more than any speech could have done. Even Claire noticed it. For one brief second, her expression changed, as if she had expected a thief and found a widower instead. Then the guard reached into the deepest pocket and lifted out the gold watch. The ballroom lights caught it, and suddenly every whisper stopped. The gold watch hung from the guard's fingers by its short chain, turning slowly beneath the chandeliers, flashing warm light across the faces gathered around the table. For the first time, Claire did not speak immediately. She knew quality when she saw it. 18-karat case. Old world engraving. The kind of object passed between families with portraits on the wall and lawyers on retainer. It did not belong beside foil-wrapped sandwiches and a child's inhaler. And that was exactly why the room decided it mattered. Where did you get that? Claire asked. Ethan's eyes moved from the watch to her face. It was given to me. By whom? A man who wanted to live. The answer moved through the ballroom like a draft under a closed door. It was not enough for Claire. It was too poetic, too guarded, too inconvenient. She extended her hand, and the guard placed the watch carefully into her palm. Claire turned it over. On the back, engraved in small, elegant letters, were the words Ethan had avoided all afternoon. For the man who gave me tomorrow, R.W. Her expression sharpened. R.W. Robert Whitmore. Her father, the founder of Whitmore Global. The man whose name was carved into hospitals, libraries, airports, and the private wing of the hotel they were standing in. This is my father's inscription, Claire said, her voice low now. That watch has been in our family collection for years. Ethan swallowed once. No, ma'am. It has been in my drawer for years. Marissa stepped closer, eager and pale. Claire, the archive inventory includes several Whitmore heirloom pieces. If he has one, he may have had access before tonight. Maddie shook her head hard. No, that is Daddy's. He keeps it in the kitchen drawer with Mom's picture. The man near the bar who had laughed at the sandwiches gave a quiet scoff. A kitchen drawer. Of course. Ethan turned toward him, not with fury, but with a stillness that made the man look away before he finished smiling. A drawer can hold more honor than a vault, Ethan said. No one answered. Claire closed her fingers around the watch. The pressure of the cameras returned to her face. Her board chairman stood near the stage, eyes narrowed, silently demanding control. Donors whispered behind champagne glasses. The empty display case still waited like a question no one wanted to ask honestly. Until this is resolved, Claire said. Mr. Walker will remain with security. Maddie made a small sound, not quite a cry, not quite a word. Her breathing had changed. Ethan heard it before anyone else did. A faint pull at the end of each inhale. A tightening he knew from emergency rooms and sleepless nights. Maddie, he said, turning fully to her. Look at me. She tried, but her eyes were wet and unfocused. Daddy, I need. Her hand reached toward the inhaler on the table. Ethan stepped for it. The guard moved at the same time, blocking him out of training, not cruelty, but the effect was the same. Move, Ethan said quietly. Sir, step back. My daughter needs her medicine. Claire hesitated. 1 second. Only one. But sometimes 1 second is long enough for pride to become harm. Ethan did not shove anyone. He did not raise his hand. He simply stepped around the guard with the calm certainty of a father who had already chosen what mattered. He picked up the inhaler, knelt before Maddie, and placed it in her shaking hand. Slow, he whispered. In and hold. Just like we practiced. The ballroom watched a man accused of theft shield his daughter from their eyes with his own body. And for a moment, even the cameras seemed ashamed to keep rolling. The quiet did not last. It broke first at the edge of the ballroom, where the private elevator opened with a soft chime no one would have noticed on any ordinary night. But this was no ordinary night, and every nervous eye turned toward the sound as Robert Whitmore stepped out with one hand resting on the polished silver cane he rarely used in public. He was 72, tall even with age bending slightly into his shoulders, dressed in a midnight blue tuxedo that made him look less like a retired founder and more like a man carved from the old rules of American power. Beside him walked his longtime driver, Daniel Price, carrying a black overcoat and trying to keep pace. Robert had been expected to arrive only for the final toast, not during the opening reception, not while his daughter stood before an empty jewelry case, a live broadcast, and a single father kneeling on the marble floor with his arms around a frightened child. Claire saw him and stiffened. Dad, she said too quickly. We have a security matter under control. Robert did not answer. His eyes had moved past her, past the guards, past the donors, pretending they had not enjoyed the humiliation a moment ago. He was looking at Ethan. More precisely, he was looking at the gold pocket watch still held in Claire's hand, its chain hanging over her white glove like a piece of history that had found its way back into the wrong room. Something changed in Robert's face. The color seemed to drain from him, not all at once, but slowly, like a light being lowered behind a curtain. His cane tapped once against the marble. Then again, Ethan heard the rhythm falter. He looked up from Maddie, who was breathing more evenly now, the inhaler held tight against her chest. Sir, Ethan said. Robert took one step forward, his lips parting around a name that did not fully come out. You? Claire turned toward him, confused. Dad, please wait in the private room. I will explain everything. Robert lifted his hand as if to stop her, but the gesture weakened halfway through. His fingers pressed against the center of his chest. The room shifted from judgment to panic in a single breath. A woman gasped. A champagne glass clicked against a tray. Daniel dropped the overcoat and reached for him. Mr. Whitmore? Robert swayed. And for the first time all evening, the people who had been so quick to accuse did not know what to do with their hands. Claire froze. Not because she did not love him, but because fear can make even powerful people feel like children again. Ethan stood. The movement was immediate, controlled, and without drama. Call 911, he said. No one moved. His voice deepened, still calm, but no longer soft. Now, a young waiter pulled out his phone. Ethan pointed to a security guard. You. Get the automated external defibrillator from the lobby wall. Red case, left of the front desk. The guard blinked. Go, Ethan said, and this time the man obeyed. Claire stepped between Ethan and her father, her face pale. Do not touch him. Robert, struggling for air, caught Ethan's sleeve with trembling fingers. His eyes locked on the man everyone had just shamed. Barely above a whisper, he said, Let him. Ethan lowered Robert carefully onto the polished marble, loosening his bow tie with one hand while keeping two fingers at the older man's wrist with the other. The ballroom had changed completely. A moment ago, everyone had leaned forward to watch a poor man's belongings spread across a table. Now they stepped back from a rich man's fear, helpless beneath the same chandeliers. Ethan did not look helpless. He looked focused, almost peaceful, as if the noise of judgment had faded and only duty remained. "Maddie," he said without turning. "Stay by the fountain, sweetheart. Keep breathing slow." Maddie nodded, still wrapped in his jacket, her small hand holding the inhaler like a lifeline. Claire knelt beside her father, trembling so visibly that she seemed like a different woman from the CEO who had ordered the search. "Dad, can you hear me?" Robert's eyes fluttered. Ethan looked at Daniel. "Has he had heart trouble before?" "A mild episode 2 years ago," Daniel said. "Medication in his coat pocket. Get it ready, but do not give him anything yet unless dispatch says to." Ethan turned toward the waiter on the phone. "Tell them he is conscious, chest pain, shortness of breath, history of cardiac issues. We are on the main ballroom level, north entrance." The waiter repeated every word, his voice shaking. The security guard returned with the red case. Ethan opened it, checked Robert again, and spoke with the steady rhythm of a man who understood that panic spreads faster than truth. "Everyone step back 3 feet. Give him air. Someone meet the paramedics at the door. You in the gray suit, clear a path through the lobby." People obeyed. Not because of money, not because of title, because calm has an authority pride can never imitate. Claire watched Ethan work, and confusion softened the edges of her fear. "How do you know all this?" she asked. Ethan kept his eyes on Robert. "Training." "What kind of training?" He did not answer. Robert's hand found Ethan's sleeve again, weak but determined. "The west stairwell," he whispered. Ethan froze for half a breath. Only half. Then he leaned closer. "Save your strength, sir." Robert shook his head slightly, tears forming at the corners of his eyes. "I remember the smoke." The words landed quietly, but they carried across the marble, like church bells heard through fog. Claire looked from her father to Ethan, then to the watch still resting on the table beside the inhaler, sandwiches, music box, and photograph. The watch no longer looked like evidence. It looked like a witness. Robert drew a careful breath. "You came back." Ethan's face tightened with a grief he had spent 10 years learning how to hide. 12 men were still inside. Daniel stared at him. Marissa stopped typing. The board chairman lowered his champagne glass as if it had become too heavy to hold. Robert's voice trembled. "And me?" Ethan swallowed, his eyes shining but steady. "Yes, sir." "And you?" The ballroom became so silent that the soft mechanical voice from the red case seemed louder than the orchestra had been. Then Robert looked at Claire with a pain deeper than illness and whispered, "Claire, this is the man who saved my life." Claire did not move. She looked at her father as if he had spoken a language she had forgotten from childhood. "Saved your life?" she whispered. Robert closed his eyes, breathing carefully now as the distant sound of sirens began to rise beyond the hotel windows. Ethan kept one hand near his pulse, but his face had gone still in that old, wounded way, the way men look when a locked door inside them is opened without permission. Robert turned his head toward the table. "The watch," he said. Claire picked it up with shaking fingers and stepped closer. "Dad, what is this?" Robert looked at Ethan first, not Claire, and in that look was apology, memory, and a debt too old to remain buried. 10 years ago, he said, each word slow, there was a fire at the Whitmore manufacturing plant in Dayton. The official report called it an electrical accident. Minor injuries. No fatalities. His lips tightened. That report was a lie. The room seemed to pull back from him. The board chairman's face went white. Marissa lowered the tablet. Even the live broadcast crew stood motionless, unsure whether they were witnessing a scandal, a confession, or something holy. Robert continued, his voice weak but clear enough to cut through every polished excuse in the ballroom. There were 12 workers trapped in the west stairwell. I was trapped with them. Smoke everywhere. Alarms failing. Doors jammed. The emergency team could not reach us fast enough. He looked at Ethan. But he did. Claire's eyes filled, but she did not wipe them. Ethan, Robert nodded. He was the safety systems engineer on the night shift. He knew the building better than anyone. He had already made it out. Then he turned around and went back in. Ethan looked down. They had families. Robert's voice broke. So did you. That quiet sentence changed the air. Maddie, still near the fountain, looked at her father with new confusion, as if she were seeing a chapter of him she had never been allowed to read. Robert reached for her with his eyes, then back to Claire. He saved 12 workers. He saved me. And when the old executive board realized the fire exposed years of ignored safety warnings, They buried it. They paid settlements. They pressured witnesses. They made Ethan sign a silence agreement and let the public believe nothing serious had happened. Claire turned slowly toward the men from the board. No one met her gaze. Robert swallowed, shame folding into every line of his face. I was in recovery for months. By the time I understood how far they had gone, Ethan was gone. His job, his insurance, his future. Gone. The word struck harder than accusation. Ethan lifted his eyes then, not angry, only tired. My wife was sick, he said softly. I needed the insurance. Maddie's hand flew to the little music box on the table. Nora's music box. Nora's photograph. Nora's absence. Claire understood all at once, and the understanding nearly took her breath away. The poor man she had ordered searched had not stolen from Whitmore. Whitmore had taken from him. A security radio crackled near the entrance, and a breathless assistant rushed in carrying a velvet tray from the private office. On it lay the missing diamond necklace, shining beneath the ballroom lights. Miss Whitmore, she stammered. It was placed in the auxiliary safe during the lighting check. There was a logging error. No one spoke. Claire looked from the necklace to Ethan's emptied bag, from the watch to Maddie's inhaler, from her father on the floor to the man kneeling beside him with grace he had no reason to give. And in that silence, the whole room finally understood that the only thing stolen that night was a good man's dignity. The paramedics arrived through the cleared path just as the last echo of that truth settled over the ballroom. They moved around Robert with practiced calm, asking questions Ethan answered before anyone else could find their voice. Medication. Symptoms. Time of onset. Breathing changes. Claire stood nearby holding the gold watch in both hands, no longer like evidence, but like a confession she had been forced to inherit. When the paramedics lifted Robert onto the stretcher, he reached for Ethan one more time. Ethan stepped close. Robert's voice was faint, but the room had learned to listen to quiet men. I should have found you sooner. Ethan looked down at him, and for a moment the years between them seemed to gather in the space under the chandeliers. The lost job, the canceled insurance, Nora's fading voice, Maddie's hospital bed, the unopened watch in a kitchen drawer. You are finding me now, Ethan said. That was all. No punishment in his voice. No triumph. Only grace, and grace made the powerful people in that room feel smaller than accusation ever could. After Robert was taken toward the ambulance, Claire walked slowly to the stage. Her heels sounded different now. Not sharp. Not commanding. Almost uncertain. The cameras were still running, the donors still watching, the board still frozen behind polite faces. Claire looked at the empty table where Ethan's life had been displayed for judgment. A child's inhaler, 2 foil-wrapped sandwiches, a widow's photograph, a music box, and the watch her father had given to a hero the company had erased. She took the microphone with both hands. Mr. Walker, she said, and her voice broke just enough to be real. I accused you without proof. I humiliated you in front of your daughter. I allowed fear, image, and pride to stand where truth should have stood. I am sorry. Ethan did not answer right away. He was kneeling beside Maddie, helping her back into his jacket, checking her breathing the way fathers do when the world has already moved on, but love has not. Then he rose and faced Claire. Do not apologize to me first, he said gently. Claire understood. She stepped down from the stage, crossed the marble floor, and knelt in front of Maddie, lowering herself below the child's frightened eyes. Maddie, I am sorry you had to watch adults forget how to be kind. Maddie looked at her father. Ethan nodded once. The little girl held the music box close and whispered, You made him look bad. Claire's eyes filled again. Yes, she said, and he was the best person in the room. No one laughed now. No one whispered. The board chairman tried to speak, but Claire turned toward him with a calm that no longer came from pride. Tomorrow morning, Whitmore Global will reopen the Dayton fire investigation. Every worker affected will be contacted. Every hidden record will be released. And Ethan Walker will be offered a public restoration of his name, full compensation, and a position overseeing safety reforms across this company. She looked back at Ethan. Only if he chooses it. Ethan looked at Maddie, then at the crowd. Power can protect people, he said, his voice quiet enough to make them lean in. Or it can embarrass them. Tonight, you get to choose what kind of power you want. Claire bowed her head. In the richest room in the city, a single father picked up his daughter's inhaler, her sandwiches, her mother's photograph, and the old watch that had waited 10 years to tell the truth. Maddie slipped her hand into his, and together they walked toward the doors, not as guests who had been dismissed, but as people whose dignity no one in that ballroom could touch again. Behind them, Claire did not call security. She did not give another order. She simply stood in silence, finally understanding that respect is not something money purchases. It is something character earns. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments what you would have said to Ethan and Maddie in that moment. And if you believe dignity still matters in a world too quick to judge, leave a like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to remember that quiet goodness is never weakness. Thank you for watching until the end of the video.